Hi, this is the African American Atheist, and today I want to jump into answering or responding to a few questions or alleged points that were recently brought up to me with respect to science, religion, and the origin of the universe. On this channel, we're going to cover all of those types of topics. So the basic premise of the argument and point that was presented to me recently was basically in response to the Big Bang Theory and overall concept of our universe being created naturally or by a god or creator. So the framed question consisted of three parts. So bear with me, right? The first question was, paraphrasing as always, no one was here to witness the creation of our universe. Therefore, we have no way of knowing how it was formed. Thus, we can't rule out the potential of it being the handiwork of an intelligent creator, and so on and so on and so on. All right. So this way of thinking is grounded in ignorance, and I don't mean that in a negative, derogatory term. Basically, I'm just saying that it's a stance that relies on a lack of knowledge in order for that stance to survive. So this type of statement is false because, the religious individual appears to forget that an event does not have to be physically witnessed in order for its existence to be known and verifiable, right? So along with, present day experiments, science, rational thought, blah, 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 all that stuff consists of verification based on inference from evidence. So we're going to talk about evidence in a lot of those types of topics on this channel. But basically what I'm meaning in a nutshell is all past events leave traces of their occurrence into the present, right? So just on a conceptual level, back then is the here that we live in today. So there's our temporal timeline, right? So even if our universe was created billions of years ago, it doesn't mean that the mechanisms of its creation cannot ever be known by beings that were not there physically to witness it. The fact that we look to the sky and observe all the objects currently expanding outward, this is evidence that at one point everything was existing, as a singularity. Hence that's a quick deduction of the presence of the Big Bang occurring in the past. That's the overall concept to be understood, and it's purely that simple. But with the religiously framed question, one is forced to conclude that the religious individual firmly believes that the only way to know if something is real is to physically witness it. But again, we're brought back to that strange dichotomy that exists with religion, where it's claimed that something such as the Big Bang has no physical evidence or was never physically seen, so therefore has no merit and it can't be true. But we all know, on the other hand, a God and a supernatural realm have yet to be physically seen, witnessed, and verified, but that's okay and believed by billions. So it's these types of religious arguments that need to be called out, need to be put into focus, because the double standard is literally insane. So the next part of the question and the point made was also against the naturalistic origin of the universe, and it was basically that everything comes from something and everything has a creator. Thus, the universe, had to have been created by someone. Now, this is an old argument, has literally been around and put to bed for hundreds of years, but it's still firmly entrenched in a lot of the religious mindset. To no fault of their own, because a lot of these topics a lot of these thought processes and ways of thinking about things, they're indoctrinated very young, as I was. So, I'm not really calling anybody out and holding them personally accountable for it. It's just the way that our society is set up. We indoctrinate our children very young, before they can even, go through their ABCs from A to Z. We're already teaching them concepts of God and religion. But basically, this argument's been around for a long time, and it basically is what's known as the first cause postulate. And the first cause postulate states that everything in existence has a cause. Everything in existence is dependent on or was created by something else. Thus, our very existence is somehow proof of a supernatural creator that created the universe and thus started this chain of causality, so it's called. They kicked it off, right? It had to be some kind of supreme being that got that started. So there's a few flaws in this way of thinking. The first one is that this first cause postulate makes the nasty and sneaky assumption that all events have a cause. We can start right there, right? That assumption is simply not true. You know, we know through modern physics that there are events that occur in nature on a subatomic level that do indeed occur without cause. Namely, you know, things that you can look up like the creation and destruction of particles and antiparticles and things like that. But the whole concept that everything must have a cause, right off the bat, you got to call that into focus and call that out and fight back against that and say that that's not necessarily true. It's incorrect to claim that all things must have a cause. The next issue that we can bring up about this argument is that this postulate assumes that whatever this first cause was, meaning God, is somehow immune to the application of the argument. Meaning, if everything in existence has a cause, what gives one the right to irrationally stop at God as this first cause? By logic, a God could have been created by an even greater and earlier creator, a cause zero, so to speak, and so on and so on and so on, and you get that infinite regression. So due to the fact that, you know, this first cause argument doesn't even stand up, it's not internally consistent, doesn't stand up to critical thinking within its own framework, and its own application, it has to swiftly be invalidated. And we view it as just merely run-of-the-mill, nonsensical religious rhetoric, and it needs to be called out as such. The next point that was brought up, and it's also a common one, was basically, and I'm paraphrasing, the universe is so beautiful that it's impossible that it was just created by accident. This point pops up quite a bit in debates and discussions, but I'm not sure why. Sometimes it's called the accidental postulate, and they give it a formal name, where we, the universe, and the planets, etc., could not have been the result of chance and time alone. That's really what it's getting down to, but even though it's not saying it, there's a problem with the concept of chance alone, so they disguise it as accident. But the argument is that there must have been some outside, unseen, all-powerful force that allowed or caused our beginning. You know, you may hear it also as being phrased as complex things do not arise, you know, by accident, so to speak. You know, so this claim is to be approached, I would say, with caution, right? So quite simply, I say that because it has what I like to call a stealth assumption, meaning it sneaks in some unnecessary philosophical baggage, right? So the claim that the existence of ourselves and the universe we happen to live in could not be accidental, it's invalid because the word accident sneakily implies a designer or some sort of guiding force that must have somehow been unintentionally deviated from. That's the only way you get an accident, is if you have some sort of trajectory or planned path and then you deviate from it and then something occurs. So by them saying it's an accident, it's already setting the framework up. You're framing the question in a way where you're automatically assuming there to be some sort of designer or creator, right? So, you know, what is meant by that, for an accident to occur, there must be some implied, desired, non-accidental state. So this is invalid from my perspective because the Big Bang Theory, along with any other developmental or evolutionary theory, does not imply some sort of plan or desired state. So one can never push the concept of an accident or a purpose into a discussion or stance that's not based on, founded on, or grounded in some sort of purpose-oriented design. The development of our universe and our own selves is not said by atheists or by anyone to be under the control of a designer. Therefore, you know, any claim involving an accident, that simply whiffs and misses the point. You know, this is another example of the run-of-the-mill religious nonsense disguised this time as a valid, logical, philosophical stance, and it still needs to be called out as such. You know, furthermore, no matter how improbable something may seem, no matter how large the odds, nothing changes the very fact that odds do indeed exist. And as long as odds exist, a chance for a positive hit exists as well, such as the nature of the development of our universe. So, you know, when you're playing with large time spans and infinite configurations and ways in which things can happen and multiple factors working on each other, you know, there's no telling, or there's really no valid stance to say that something could not have happened. What's the chances of an accident like that happening? We're only allowed to say that because we're the product of that, chance occurrence, and we can think of it and say, what are the chances of that occurring? It's all anthropic when you think about it. It's all self-fulfilling, for us to be able to have those types of discussions. But they're pretty much meaningless, and they've been put to bed for hundreds of years, but they kind of rear their heads whenever you have this kind of discussion. So again, this is the African American Atheist, and I would like to invite you to like, subscribe, share. We're going to keep these kinds of conversations going, and I'll see you in the next video.